everybody. Welcome to today's Leadership Focus workshop. Glad that you're all here. And I guess we've introduced most folks. If you'd like to introduce yourself, you can turn on your camera and we can do that. One of the things that I hope with these workshops we would do is sort of be introduced to different ways of discernment and of engaging in the work of the church with some new tools. And some of these tools may not seem as new to some of us, but they're just different ways to engage in conversation about what God is doing in our midst and how we might take advantage of the Spirit moving in us. So I'd like to welcome Reverend Lorenzo Lebrija, who is the author of this book, How to Try, which I suggest you pick up a copy of. It's very small, but when I read it, I felt like it was so easy to understand this kind of model of innovation that I just think it's a great book. And so I think, check it out, look at it and see what you think. And he's going to talk to us more about the TryTank, which is you're the founding director, is that correct? Of
I am,
the TryTank, which is an innovation lab for church innovation and design thinking. So those may be very new words for most of us. So I'm sure he'll get into what those things mean. But we're just really glad to have you with us, and glad to have you kind of share with us what you're doing, maybe to inform some of our work as Moravians in mostly North Carolina, but we're kind of all spread out, but to give us some sense of maybe some options that we have out there for how to try new things. So I'm gonna give the floor to you and we'll get started.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Rebecca. And thanks everyone for being here. It's always wonderful to be able to share this with other people. As I was mentioning to Rebecca before we started, it's the book's not so much about, I'm surprised that we actually are able to even sell any of the books, because I pretty much just give it all away all the time. I just go around and say here's what the book says. So you don't even have to go out and buy it. So what we're going to talk about today is really a framework. And it is a framework where when you're thinking about how might we be church in the world today, what is this now post-pandemic sort of time for us mean? And how could we approach church perhaps a little bit different? Hopefully this will give you a framework to do that. It is an incredibly simple framework. I'll be happy also to share the slides with you so you can have all the copies of everything that I'll be talking about. So just rest assured, and I will answer questions towards the end. But I hopefully, and I'm as we go through, you'll realize that, wow, this is actually not that hard. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here so that we can actually go ahead and begin. So, and I just messed it all up. No, just kidding. Is it there? There we are. So there we are. This is it, right? So we are going to be talking about how to try. And in particular, what we're going to be talking about is the how do we do this work in the church? Design thinking is not a new novel thing in the world. It is something that businesses have been using for quite a while. And it is just a new way of approaching something we've all done. It's a very natural thing that we do. So sometimes when we call something a framework, people stand back and are like, oh, what's he talking about? It really is just a sort of systematic way of approaching it. It's the same way that we study systematics of theology. This is just is there a way that this process works that we can copy, that we can use? So that's what we're looking at. Real briefly, this is what I'll give you an overview of what TryTank is so that you can get an idea of the type of work that I'm privileged enough to do. We'll do some, before you start, there's some things you probably need to just be aware of on yourself and how to build a team. And then we'll get to the 3 steps. Wow, here they are. They're simple. You generate insights, you develop ideas, and then you try it. It's not that hard, like I said. This is relatively simple. But in fact, if you were to look, and I have several books on design thinking, if you were to look at design thinking as a whole, you can get some processes that I've seen are up to 13 steps. But I try to make it as simple as possible to remember. And also I'm a Trinitarian. So there you go. That was just something that worked for me. So what is TryTank? The first thing you need to know is we're a joint venture between Virginia Theological Seminary and the General Theological Seminary. Go GTS. That's where I graduated from, in New York City. And both of these seminaries came together. And the thought that we had was like, there's enough people that are coming up with ideas. Is there a way that we can actually try some of those? There's enough think tanks where, God, we in the church can really sit back and second guess and quarterback everything, right? But who's willing to go out there and try it? And that's what we wanted to do. We wanted to create something that tried. So it might ask you the question like, what is it though? What exactly are you talking about, Lorenzo? Is it a think tank? Nope, it's not. Is it a way to save the church? Absolutely not. God's church does not need saving. There's only been one Savior, died already for us, so that's done. It's not about that. It's not a silver bullet. Rather, the way that we'd like to think of it is, it's a place where we can ask, what if? All of us who've been in ministry for any length of time, at some point or another, I bet you that one of us, as you've been doing ministry, if you've been out there in a church, you're like, I wonder what if we did that differently? What if we did that over there? Or what if we invited those people? Whatever it might be, there's always been the sort of questions that arise that are like, what if we did this? And so, but the way that innovation in the church generally works looks something like this. Some 13 sort of steps, right? Where you think of an idea, pray about it, write it out, form a committee, hold listening sessions, write a paper, go to a conference, do theological reflection on it, talk about it in the diocese, our governing sort of area, discern it some more, bring it to your governing body, the vestry. They'll say no the first time. You've got to bring it back again, and then you finally try it. The problem with that, of course, is that it's a long process, and that's how you end up with a MySpace page in 2022. We were like, is there an easier way of just trying stuff? And we've said, well, what if we just try it? Just try it. Just go out and try it. Just try something. Just try something. And that's what we are. We are an opportunity to ask, what if? A chance, if you will, to dedicate some time and resources, because a lot of those times that we ask, what if, we just don't have the time or the energy or the resources to be able to do it because we're busy with the running of the church every day. So we are like, well, what if we set aside someone that can do this work, someone and his llama to do this work? What if we did that sort of work? So think of us, if you will, as the R&D part of the church, but with one caveat. So whenever I say R&D, people are like, oh, you're kind of like Silicon Valley, right? You break it so that then you can rebuild it. I'm like, oh, not really. We bring tradition with us. Tradition is important to us. So we actually build on the tradition and say, might the Holy Spirit be offering us a different way of doing this work today? But, I think the best way that I can show you some of this is by showing you some of our experiments. We have about 71 of them at this point. So let me share some of them with you at this time. This was the Alexa prayer skill. It's been very successful. It's a great party trick, by the way. If you walk into someone's house and they have an Alexa, just say, hey, Alexa, open Episcopal prayer. And this is sort of what she sounds like.
Hey friends, it's Father Lorenzo, and I'm going to teach you how to use the Alexa skill. Once you have enabled the skill using the link on this page, simply do what I'm about to do. Alexa, open Episcopal prayer.
The Lord be with you.
Why, thank you. And also with you.
Let us pray.
Anyways, you no longer, in fact, let me go back here for a second. We were called one of the most engaged skills on Alexa, in the sense of, even though we don't have a large audience, it's about 500 people on a given are praying their daily office with Alexa. It's the fact that they keep coming back to do that. And so Amazon sent us this letter saying we're one of the most engaged. So we no longer have to enable the skill. You can just walk up to any Alexa speaker and sort of turn that on, and it'll work, which is kind of cool. The way that I see it is like, yeah, let's do that. And again, great party trick. Just go into someone's house and they'll be like, why is the speaker praying with me? So that's one of the things we did. In the Episcopal Church, we have a lot of small congregations. And so we did this thing called Virtual Supply Priest. And we teamed up with the monks from the Society of St. John the Evangelist. And they're doing basically sermons during Advent. They did it. And now they're about to do it during Lent. To give you an idea, we have in the Episcopal Church, we have about 6,000 congregations in the country, of which 1,730 have 29 or fewer people on a Sunday. So we're a denomination of small congregations. Unfortunately, a lot of those don't have the ability to have a priest every Sunday with them. And what that leaves you with is sometimes a really well-meaning Mrs. Johnson who will get up and give a sermon. And I've literally heard this, that one time one woman got up and read an article from Reader's Digest. Nothing against Reader's Digest. It's a great publication, but I'm going to guess the Jesus count was pretty low that Sunday on that sermon. So was there a way that we could share good sermons from the monks? We did it last Advent, and we thought maybe 40 congregations, if we're really lucky, will sign up and take it. In the end, it was 484 congregations took the virtual, now we call it virtual preaching monks, and they're back for Lent this year. Again, we just went out and tried it. We thought we might get something. We sometimes hit it out of the ballpark. We did this one called Connect a Congregation, where we used texting to connect with people. And particularly when the pandemic started, it was amazing how connected people were by using texting. And you can do it from your computer. You don't have to be on your phone all the time. But we now know that if you have a special event or something coming up where you want people to show up, if you text them to show up, much more than email, much more than any other resource, texting will get people to show up at your church to do that event. But we tried it. That's how we figured it out. We did this thing called the digital collection plate. And I'll start playing the video so you can actually see it. And what we did is, it's this little thing that was a little box that was able to go, and people were able to dip their credit card, and then an amount comes up and you just sort of select it, and then you just sort of sign for it. And this is because we're going to a cashless society. And we don't want to make it so that someone that doesn't have cash with them couldn't donate. Well, it was taking a little too long. Even that time, that's all what you just saw was a whole transaction for the person to give. But now you can actually do it with tapping. One of the good things that came from the whole pandemic is that tapping with your credit card is now in. So you can actually make a contribution in about 3 seconds. So there's a second part of this experiment that will be coming up. And the final one that I want to show you is this one, because it is so unique. So Lorenzo said, like, hey, you know what? There's a lot of people that are going to group fitness classes like spinning, and I bet you that they're finding their community there. What happens if we add a Eucharist to it? What happens if we bring God into it? Because there's this chain called Soul Cycle. And when you walk into Soul Cycle, the lights are dim. They have candle lights. It says, find your soul on the wall. And then the instructor's like, hey, everyone, get on your bikes. There's no day but today. This day was made just for you. I'm like, throw in a Jesus in there and you got a sermon going on. And I said, well, what if we did it together? So that was my thinking. It's like, yay, let's go ahead and do it. So we rented out a spinning class. And you can tell, by the way, if you look at the picture, that the deacon was a little bit dubious the whole time as to whether or not this was going to work. She knew better. So we advertised it. So we know that almost 27,000 people saw our ads. Of 86% of them were women. We're like, this is great. They saw our ads on average like 5 times, so a total of 160,000 times. Almost 1,200 of them actually took action from the ads, like they interacted with it in some way. They clicked on it, shared with it, probably saying, what is this crazy person doing? We had a click-through rate of 1.4, which is 3 times what Facebook says is a good one. 9 people signed up and no one showed up. Womp womp. So all that to say that in all of this work, you know, about 2 out of the 3 experiments that we do don't work. And that's okay, because we're not called to be successful in this. Success is being faithful. And so not everything's going to work, but at least we can say that we tried it. And when you see the method as to how we reached it and how we try, you'll see why it's okay to try, because you're not betting the bank. It would have been really bad if we had like gone out and signed a 5-year lease and rented, you know, the spinning bicycles for 5 years and hired people and then have it not work. That would have been bad. But the method that I'm going to show you is not so bad. So that's sort of what TryTank is. I hope that gives you an idea and why it is that Lorenzo loves his job so much. It's just fun. I really get to do this. And excuse me. And the fact that I get to do this for the Holy Spirit is even better. So before we start, there's a couple of things you need to remember. First of all, this is all about Jesus. Even as much fun as we have, we always need to be centered on the fact that this is about spreading the good news of Jesus Christ to a world that desperately needs to hear it. So in all that we do, always be mindful of that and always be inviting the Holy Spirit to inform the work. Now, you also, now that we're talking about Jesus, he was a smart fellow. And I am always just so happy to see that he sent them out 2 by 2. Because I'll give you an example. Imagine yourself like you're in China. Don't ask me how you got there. Let's just say that you are in China and you're traveling and you get lost. And you're like, oh, I don't speak this language and I'm totally lost and I see no signs in English. I guess I can go like this and they might feed me like, but what else? How do I get home? You're going to be sad. You're going to be scared, whatever the emotions, you're going to be that. Imagine that exact same scenario, but you have a friend with you. All of a sudden you're just as lost, but it doesn't feel as bad, does it? Now you're like, oh, we may have an adventure to tell our friends about, right? It's a totally sort of different experience with it. And that's why I think, should always do this work together in teams. So build your team. That is how we need to begin this whole work. So to build a team, what you want to look for are people who are just as excited about this as you are. Trust me, reality will hit you no matter what. So might as well not get those people that are going to be bringing you down throughout the process. Get people who are excited, who have skills, and make sure that they can play different roles, and look for diversity. Don't get all men or all women or all white. If you're looking to, again, reach young people, try to find some young people that could help you in this sort of case. The way that I describe it in the book is you want to have a team that's like a T. In other words, you have a lot of people or number of people that have like skills on a whole bunch of things, but they're deep on something. In other words, find someone that knows how to do numbers. If you're not good at numbers, find someone that can keep the numbers. If you're not a good writer, find someone who is a good writer to be part of your team. Again, everybody else will have these like shallow parts that we all sort of know and we're learning together, but they have individual parts that they're not. It's like a team. So find someone that's good at communication. Find someone who's good at numbers. Find someone who's good at public speaking, because you're going to be speaking to your congregation about, hey, this is what we're doing, right? So find people that can fill those roles. That's important as you're doing this work. My recommendation is you find a team that probably has between 3 and 5 people. You can expand it or contract it for other things. So when we talk about research in a moment, you can get the team to go up to like 10 people and then go out and say, hey, will you help us? We just want to observe people, whatever. Just take this notebook, answer these questions, just stand at the mall. Just help us for this day. That's how you expand the team for that day. But then you can bring it back down to your core team, because it's easier to coordinate when you can all meet. And it's just easier to have like the brainstorming and all those sorts of things. So you can expand it and bring it down, but your core team should be between 3 and 5 people. You want to make sure that you're always communicating with each other, what you're finding. You have to be really good about sharing that with each other. And especially when you're finding insights. And we'll talk about what the insights are in a moment, because step number 1 is generating insights. And again, all of this is just straight from here, the 3 steps that are here. So when you walk into this generating insights, this opportunity for us to find those aha things that will help us as we're doing this work, it's good to have this mindset of being curious. That's it. You're not saving the world. You're not looking for the silver bullet. Just be curious as you're beginning this work, right? So when you're beginning the work, you need to have a question. We call it in design thinking, we call it the design question. And it might be for you like, should we add a contemporary service? Can we better serve our neighborhood as it has been changing around us? Should we open up a preschool? How can we bring in more revenue, right? Maybe you've heard all about this, like social enterprise, and you're like, it's our time to start doing this. Like, perfect. These are the types of questions that this framework will help you do. These are the types of questions that this will help you answer to get to that. So once you have your question, and let's say, for example, that our question is, can we better, let's go with, should we open up a preschool? Let's just go ahead and go with that. I don't know why. It seems like the right one for today. So what you want to do is you want to begin by looking, and I know it seems weird to say to begin with, but it is secondary research. In other words, it's not research that you're doing yourself, but you want to become better informed. So you have your question, should we open up a preschool? So you want to define your goal and your goals and context, like what will determine for us whether we want to open up a preschool? Well, we need to figure out is there an audience for this? What would it sort of look like? What does a preschool look like these days? Does it have to be licensed? all those types of questions as you're beginning to do. And that's why it's called secondary research, because you're beginning the very grand, you're just looking at it from like 30,000 feet. Who goes to preschools? How much do they charge? How much does it cost? What's the profit margin on this, right? And then you can begin and actually start retrieving your data to look at it. This would be no different, for example, if you were looking at the contemporary service question. You would begin by, okay, how do we know what is a contemporary service these days? Are we just sort of mimicking an evangelical church? Is that sort of what it looks like? Or does it look different for us in our tradition? How would we frame this research? In other words, what are we really looking at? Well, what type of people go to a contemporary service? Are we doing the contemporary service only because we want to reach younger people? And if so, is this still the best way to reach younger people? Is this what younger people are into? You realize how by beginning with one question and framing your research, what you're really ending up with are other questions to go and answer. And then you select and retrieve your data. And your data, by the way, it's not that hard to come up with. Your data could be Google. Your data could be the local chamber of commerce. So you might go, for example, to the local chamber of commerce. Let's go back to the preschool idea and say like, hey, how many preschools are in our neighborhood? How many young kids are in our neighborhood? Preschools are a very specific age group. So how many are open? What are their charges? Can you give me their websites? That's what chambers of commerce do. Economic development offices help you with this sort of information. If you were looking at like the contemporary service, you would look at, okay, again, what does it look like? Who's going to it? Do we have that demographic who's going to it within our 15-minute radius that people drive to go to church around us? That's the sort of thing you want to look at, right? So as you're looking at this, you just sort of want to be able to come up with more questions. Because once you're able to do that and you select and retrieve your data, then you'll proceed with the analysis. So it's like, what does this mean? What does that mean? What does it mean that we have only, that we actually have an exodus of young families in our community? Well, that's not a good thing. That are more retirees moving into our community? Well, that's going to be weird if we don't have any evidence to show that they actually like a contemporary service. So what does that mean for what we're thinking about? And then you draw some conclusions as you're comparing your findings. Again, the secondary research is important just to sort of lay if you think of it as a picture, this is sort of like the backdrop. This is like, if you're going to do a picture of a boat, this would be sort of like the ocean. You're painting the ocean first, because before you start thinking about what's my boat going to look like and what colors are going to be, you need to figure out like, what's the ocean going to be? Or is it going to be on a lake? You need to sort of get a lay of the land. Great places to do this are like Google, Barna, Pew, and Gallup. By the way, if you don't know what Barna, Pew, or Gallup are, you can even Google those. That's what's great about this. Google really answers all questions. These are organizations that actually study the church. Barna has very much an evangelical slant to it, so you want to make sure that you're getting other sort of looks at it. Pew is a more like non-denominational, just sort of like very straightforward. This is what America is when it comes to religion. And Gallup, of course, they do all sorts of Gallup polls and about happiness and everything else, but they also ask about religion. But they'll give you insights, right? And this is a key, though. When you're looking at secondary research, 10 years is about as far back as you want to go. I would not trust something right now, for example, from 2009, 2010. I wouldn't give it as much credence now as I do something from 2021, 2022. And this isn't even counting the impact and the long-lasting impact that this pandemic will have on life. We can talk about this more at the end, about just some of the severe impacts that it'll have for the church. But that's what you sort of want to do, right? So you want to make sure that you're looking at all this data. Once you have some data, and let's say, for example, that you, going back to our question of the school, you're like, okay, I still think that a preschool would be profitable for us. I think it's a way of getting children started with their foundational, Christian theology when they're young. That's great. All right. So let's say that you found this research. It seems to be profitable. It seems to be working. They seem to be the thing to go. One of the research that I saw says a Huntington Learning Center profits about $400,000 a year. You're like, my God, could we use some of that money to run our church? This would be great. Awesome. You sort of have your landscape, right? You have your oceanscape. You're like, okay, now it's time to start building our boat. Before you start building your boat, there's more checking to do, because you've only found information that's national. You don't know if the information of what's working, when we talk about a Huntington Learning Center having $400,000 profit, that might be the one that they pulled out of New York City. And you're like, well, I don't know. I don't think Winston-Salem's a lot like New York City, right? You might be like, that may not. So what you want to do is this second part of our research, which is observation. What is prompting people's behaviors? Like, why are they choosing a preschool? Look for adaptations. Is anyone doing something different? So the way you want to do this is you can even go, for example, and stand outside of a preschool that's near you and just see who comes. Just stand there with your coffee, drinking coffee as they're dropping off kids. Try not to look as creepy as I just made that sound before they call the cops on you. Don't make it that creepy, but just try to sort of figure out like, okay, it looks like it's this type of family. Does that match what we found in our research, right? We have the secondary research. Now you're beginning to do your own research of your own neighborhood. What is prompting? If you have an opportunity, like I've actually done this. I do. I actually have this little thing here. It says, I'm a priest, want to talk. And every once in a while, I'll just go sit down at a Starbucks and I'll put this on my table. You'll be surprised how many people are like, what does this guy have on his table? And how many people just will want to talk. And if it's the right age of something that I'm studying, like right now we're studying a lot about young adults, I'll ask them questions that are related to it. It's like, hey, do you have kids? Are you sending them to preschool? Would preschool be a thing for you all? What kind of, how much do you pay? Would you be willing to pay? And buy them a cup of coffee. You'd be surprised, how much people will do for a cup of coffee these days. They will just open up. People we don't hear each other's stories that often, I think. And so they like it when someone is interested in their story. So just ask to people, see their body, their body language and emotions as they're talking about. Maybe they went to a preschool that was a religious school and they have a lot of it. You'll see it. You'll see their emotions in their body, how excited they are, how they move up or down. You'll see a lot of that. Again, remember, as we walked into this, the mindset was being curious. That's what this means. Just be curious about it. You're not looking for like, now I've got you. You're the one who did the murder on September. No, that has nothing to do with that. You're actually trying to find that information. And the more curious you can be, the less you are wedded to a solution at the end. Because trust me, you can get false positives. If you want to go out and find someone to confirm only what you think you already know, you will find it. Because you will manipulate their answers and their questions in such a way that it will get you the answers you're looking for. What you really want to have is that mindset that says, tell me what you know so that I can know it. And that might help us as we do this work. Seek the unexpected as you're doing it. So that's kind of when you're doing observation. Also, make sure you're like sort of seeking the area that you know. Don't go more than 15 minutes. We know people necessarily, and it might be different, by the way. This is actually, you might even question Lorenzo. You might be like, hey, Lorenzo, I hear you say that nationally people will not drive more than 15 minutes to go to church. However, in a state like North Carolina, which is a much more heavily church state than other states that might have gone into this average, people are willing to go longer distances for a church that they like. And mainly because there's no traffic, right? There's a difference between sitting in traffic for 15 minutes and actually driving for 15 minutes, which in North Carolina is like, I don't know, 82 miles or something. So you can actually get much farther. Select the participants. But at some point, you are going to want to have some questions with people who would be your target audience, right? So let's go back to let's switch back to the contemporary service. If you think the contemporary service is what you're thinking about for younger people, well, sit down with some of them, buy them pizza and some Cokes and take them and just sit down and be like, hey, if we did a service that was aimed at you all, would there be, regardless of what it looked like right now, would you all sort of go, right? So you want to be able to just get their answers. So select those participants very carefully that they match who you have identified from secondary research, who you now realize do or don't live near you, and then go towards them and ask them, start having conversations with them, observe them carefully as you do that, so that you, again, the body language, capture as much data as you can. Many times they will let you record the conversation, but if not, jot down notes. When you're doing the notes, jot down like headlines, and then as soon as you're done, fill in the headlines for yourself. Like write a big headline like has no kids, or will never spend more than $1,500 a month. I don't know what the amount is, but that type of thing. Write the headline, then afterwards be like, oh yeah, this is important that I remember this, and then go back and share with your team. This is also part of the good news about having a team, is that you don't have to do it all by yourself. You're able to have others who will go out there. So imagine if I had to go out and observe 9 people, that's going to take me a while. But if I only have to do 3, I can do that over the course of a week, 3 mornings. And then if 2 others in my team did that, there's our 9, rather than trying to figure out the time to do that. It's good to be able to do that, but make sure you share the insights with each other, because that's how you get to see the little red thread that's going through them, to be like, oh, there's something going on there. There's a there. When you're having conversations with people, which is part of our observational work, right? You want to ask open-ended questions. You don't want to ask yes or no questions unless there is a yes or no question. It is important to know, like, if at the end, like, if a church offered a preschool, would you ever avail yourself of it? That's a good question to ask towards the end, just because you've done. But other than that, be like, hey, what do you think of pre-K education? What do you think of this? Ask them for examples, not generalities. You don't want someone to be like, well, I like music programs. When I think about a contemporary service, be like, can you give me some specific names of songs that you like? When was the last time you went to a contemporary service that you liked? If the music's so important, tell me more about that. And you want to start as broad as possible, and then come down to the more deeper questions, right? They'll lead you through these questions, but you can only get to the deep questions after you've built the rapport, after you have some sort of relationship with someone. And this is where also people will tend to give you more aspirational answers. So you want to mind the gap between something when they gave you an answer to a question and when they gave you an example that you're like, oh, that's weird. That's totally the opposite. They're like, oh my God, I just totally love, very classical music, this, that, the other, but I only go to contemporary services. Like, that's interesting. You say you like classical music a lot, but you only go to contemporary services. Can you tell me how does that work for you? What do you find in one and not the other? Those types of things. Look for those things that are not consistent in what they're sharing with you, and that'll actually give you some good insights as well. It's also possible that you can, after you've talked to enough people, that you can plan an actual empathy experience. An empathy experience is when you're actually going to create something. I'll give you an actual example. When COVID first hit and our churches were closed, one of the things that I did is I started talking to people just to see whether or not what they were finding through digital church was similar in emotion to what they found when they were in person. And I was just having conversations, blah, blah, blah. And in one of the conversations, a gentleman, he probably at the time was like 75, he said to me, it's good to have a plan B, blah, blah. And he just dropped this thing in, it's good to have a plan B. So being the good, curious person that I was, I went back and said, hey, could you go back for a second? You said having a plan B. What does that mean? Could you share that with me? It's like, oh yeah, when you get to be a certain age, Lorenzo, you wake up and sometimes you're just going to be in pain. And some of that pain might be in your legs and you're not really able to move as much or as easily. So to get myself to church means that I'm in a lot of pain and I'm going to be grumpy, but that's like my social outlet, or that's so important to me that I can't miss it. So having a plan B where I could watch it from home, where I don't have to be in pain was something. And I was like, that is fascinating. I don't know what that is like. I don't have to get up and wonder, like, do I not get to do what I get to do today, right? That's not my experience. So an empathy experience that I did for this was, and he said, it's like a 50-50 chance. I said, okay. And this was coming up to Mother's Day. And I said, okay, so I'm going to create my own empathy experience. I'm going to do this thing where Mother's Day, if and I went on Google, and on Google, you can tell it to give you a random number between this and this, and it'll come up with a number. I said, okay, I'm going to ask Google to give me a random number between 1 and 1,000,000. If the number is an even number, I will call my mom. I get to call my mom for Mother's Day, which I love to do. If the number is an odd number, totally random, then I don't get to call my mom. And I did it. And the number was odd, totally random. And I was like, oh. And then I was like, this feels really bad. If to be clear, I ended the experiment, right? My mom didn't need to suffer, and I did, but I had never myself faced something where all of a sudden I couldn't do something that it was totally up to chance. And for the first time, I realized what he meant by plan B and why that was so important to him, and why I go around saying, no, keep digital church going. It's important, not just because of the pandemic. It's important for those. I did a little more research, by the way. Then I went back and did some more research, secondary research. Turns out something like 66% of people above a certain age on a regular basis have mobility issues. I had no idea. This is just something I discovered. I was like, oh my God, thank God we do have digital church now. Anyway, so that tells you more or less what an empathy experience is. So design something that puts you sort of where they are, what the choices that they're having to make are, and you will see it from completely different eyes. As a reminder, in all of this research and always get others involved from the congregation, so that all the stakeholders are buying into this process that you're going through. So if you are going to do a process like this, and you're going to set up a team of 3 to 5 people in the congregation, announce it to the congregations like, hey, we're going to begin this process to try to figure out what might be next. These are the people that let's pray for them. And then every once in a while, just give updates to the congregation as to how this is working. You will see that they will buy into it and how much more they do buy into it. So that's step one. You now have some ahas. You're like, aha, this is important. There are people around us who might be interested in a preschool. There might be people around us who have the wherewithal to pay for preschool. We believe that it is going to be profitable for us. So now comes the time to develop what would be our unique sort of preschool, right? I suppose we could just open a random one, but what's the difference between that and something else? We have our own charism. So what would it look like for our preschool? And that's where we get to step number 2. Step number 2, developing ideas. The mindset that you want to have as you're walking into this one is to be playful. Remember, the first one was being curious. You want to be as curious as possible. In the second one, you want to be playful. If you do step number 2 and you're not laughing with your team somewhere along the lines, you're doing it wrong. Go back. Just go back and start again. You should be laughing a lot. This is an opportunity to be creative and playful and really innovative. This is where the innovation really happens, which is why I say that this is really a time when the Holy Spirit can be with you. This is a time when you always want to begin with prayer, when you want to invite the divine to help you spread the word. This isn't our ideas. This is God's opportunity. So give God the chance to be there, and then just trust that God is in this work. All right. So with that, we began with a what if question, right? Now is a time to shift our design question from what if we did this? What if we opened up a pre-K? What if we did a contemporary service? Those are the 2 that we're looking at. Now it becomes, okay, we have enough research. How might we open up a preschool? How might we do a contemporary service that's unique to us? Both of these, right? Realizing that in all churches, you can walk into them and you're going to get a different expression of how to worship. So the same way, your preschool or your contemporary service are going to look different. And I'm going to present with you a couple of ways here that you can do this work. The first one, I love this one because it's something you can just sit down and do yourself. So it's called the mashup. You should actually just try this for fun sometimes, just to like completely mash up. The way you do it is you choose 2 completely unrelated categories. You generate elements for those categories, and then you mash them up. And let me give you an example. So let's say, for example, and the example that I have here was from something else, which is I was trying to figure out something for people who are older, and how to reach them so that they could find more with us here at the church. And the two unrelated categories were like, well, what do older people do with their free time? And the other is like, from the insights, we gathered that they'd had free time because they're retired. And the other one was that they were finding meaning. And there is a lot of research that tells us that once people retire, they enter the third stage of their life. The first stage is all about you and my own voice and like discovering yourself and what's my career going to be. The second phase is more about like your family and raising your family and growing your career. The third phase is more like, oh, I've done all that. What's it all about? Why did I do all this? Which is, I think, is a great opportunity for churches to step in and say like, hey, we can help you with that part. So let's say that you were looking at that question and you might be like, oh, what do people do with free time? And here's some of the things that I came up with. I was just sitting here and I said, okay, you can read, you can paint, you can work out, you can travel, volunteer, you can have a side gig, you can go to the movies, you can take a class, you can do a hobby. Okay, those are generally things that people can do with free time. What do people do to find meaning? Well, you can pray, you can meditate, you can serve, you can journal, learning, poetry, listening to music, being in nature, talking with a friend, donating money. Those are all ways that you can find meaning. The way you mash them up is you would be like, okay, let's say we go, how about if you take number 2, paint, and you do it with, I don't know, being in nature. And so, okay, well, that tells you like, hey, what if we created a group that went out and just invited all the seniors in our neighborhood to go out into nature and paint, and we'll paint what it means for us. And you see what you're doing is all of a sudden you've taken something that we know they like in their free time, and you're taking something which is how people can find meaning, and you've mashed them up to create one thing that you could do together, that you could actually invite people to from your neighborhood who may not be familiar with it, because you're literally going out to nature to paint. There's not necessarily much Jesus in there at the moment, but what you're doing is you're allowing them to get to know you. And this, I have an MBA as well. The basics of marketing, my MBA is in marketing, are know, like, and trust. That's marketing. People have to know you before they can like you, before they can trust you. That's marketing. And this is the same for church. They have to know that you exist so then they can like you enough to be like, hey, maybe I could trust them with my spiritual life and go there and find other fun. Another way, so, and let's say that these were like not as far apart and that we wanted. Let's say we actually wanted to like create something totally different. All right. They're looking for meaning and luxury hotel. So meaning they're the same ones that we talked about a moment ago. But what are some of the things that we think about when we think about a luxury hotel? Well, there's elegant design, lots of flowers, high thread count, friendly staff, room service, minibar, great food, live piano music, gift shop, spacious room. Okay. Now, what would it look like if all of a sudden we took poetry and great food? Hey, what if you did a night of poetry at someone's house? Or what if you did a night of poetry at a restaurant where there was great food, but you also learn how to do, it is not that hard to learn how to do like typewriter poetry. That's why I have a typewriter behind me. Or let's say, for example, you were doing meditating and gift shop. What if you brought in some things that people or created? Does your town have a shop that sells stuff about meditation? Is there a place? Could you create some things that could be offered that, you know, we in the Christian tradition also have centering prayer, which is all about meditation. We have other ways of approaching what other people call meditation. Could we create something that could be sold at a gift shop that's already selling this stuff about meditation? And then it has your name, your church's name on it. Again, these are just ideas about how you might be able to. Theoretically, you're going to come up with a ton of these ideas. And that is good because you want tons and tons and tons. So you would begin with like praying and lots of flowers. Oh, all right. How does that? Could we do a prayer group that actually does flower arrangements, that we're praying over all the flowers? Could that be a thing we do for Mother's Day? And how unique would that be that rather than just roses from the grocery store or somewhere else, you could actually get flowers that were actually prayed over by someone? Again, you're just creating, and I just, you know, all of these things I'm just creating as I go along. That's what this does. It allows you to just be creative as you're doing this work. So that's the mashup. Another way that you can come up with ideas is other people's shoes. This is very similar to the empathy experience. Remember the 75-year-old guy that I told you about, that plan B, right? Well, what does his whole day look like? If we were staying with the idea of how do we create something for more senior people, for those in the third stage of life, well, what does their whole day look like, right? Maybe they get up, and you want to do it step by step from the moment they get up to the moment that they go to sleep, because along the way, you can come up with ideas. So for example, as you're looking at this, you can be like, well, when they get up, they listen to music while making coffee. It's like, oh, well, what if we created a little podcast that was like religious music from our church? And we just provided it for free. It's like, hey, you want to wake up in a sort of nice, yet meditative, yet optimistic, yet God-filled way? Here's a free podcast for you. They read the local paper. Hey, this is actually straight from the book. Could we put something in the paper that has like a little trivia question about the Bible? Or could we do a column in the local free newspaper every other week that just says like, hey, here's some questions on meaning that we'd like to deal with. Send us your questions. Maybe they do yoga. Could we offer yoga at the church? Is that something that they might come to? You see, you're starting to come up with more ideas just based on the things that they do each day. They listen to a podcast in the car. Well, could we create a podcast that gives them a more positive sort of outlook on life? Those are the questions to engage as you're looking at their day. That's one of the great things about this. You just take the same thing that you did in your empathy. You figure out who is that person or who is your target. If you're looking at young people, let's say that was the reason why you wanted to do the contemporary service. You could absolutely do the contemporary service. Say it's for young people. Well, what does their day look like? Well, they get up. I think they go to school, because every time you say "I think," they'd be like, I need to find that out. I need to make sure that that's right. In some of these steps, you actually go from step number 2 back to step number 1 to make sure that your data is correct, to make sure that you find out, because you will have more questions as you go along without a doubt. So that's the other people's shoes. It'll give you more ideas. Again, tons and tons of ideas. You want to have tons of ideas. You want your problem to be like, oh my God, I have way too many good ideas. Exactly. That's what you want. You want, rather than like, well, we couldn't come up with anything. It's like, well, sorry about that. All right. So an e-storm, yeah, it's exactly what it sounds like. It's like a brainstorm, but it's on electronic format. What you do is you send an email to friends. And this way, it doesn't have to even be like geographically located within your area. Just have a provocative line where you say something like, hey, so can I borrow 3.5 minutes of your time? That's provocative. It doesn't have to be provocative like sexually or like insulting someone. It can be like, hey, can I borrow 2.47 minutes of your time? People are like, what does 2.47 minutes mean even? That type of thing that gets them to sort of, it comes from you and it has got that line. People are going to be like, what does that mean? And then you literally begin by managing the expectation, saying, hey, I won't take more than the 2.48 minutes that I've asked you. Here's my challenge. And you present with them the question. We're looking at how might we reach younger people in our community? And we thought about doing a contemporary service. So we want to find out, when I say contemporary service, what does that mean to you? And have them write back to you. That's it. That's all you're asking of them. Or what would that look like to you? And you can say pictures work well too. If you've always had a picture of what it looks like, go ahead and download one of those and put it in your email and send it back to me. And then what you want to do is, when you eventually do come up with, like, let's say you send it out to 100 people. It's an easy way also of getting a lot of people involved, because you send it to 100 people, maybe 50 will respond, but you send it back to them and be like, hey, these were the top ideas from our team. Which one of these do you like the most? You put like 3 of them. They can help you in the selection process as well, as you're discerning of all these ideas that you have, which ones to actually go in on. So again, you can do an e-storm, and that's a very effective way of doing this. And of course, there is my favorite, which is a brainstorm. A brainstorm, I just know that God is present in at least the way that I see God, which is just creating and making out of chaos something good, because it's just so much fun. So you want to make sure you have a leader. You want to have the right number of people. This would be an opportunity to expand your group, but don't go more than 7 people, because there inevitably will be way too many ideas to go through. You want to have your clear design question. Remember, we moved it over to a how might we question now. So the question might be, how might we develop a contemporary service that's just for us? Or how might we have a preschool that's different than everything else around us, right? Because I'm a firm believer that just because there's 5 other preschools doesn't mean that you won't get it. It just means that there's a lot of people that are looking for preschools around you, and that there's going to be opportunities because probably younger people are still moving into your area. And just know the rules. And you're asking yourself, hey, Lorenzo, there's rules for brainstorming? There are. Here they are. There's no bad ideas. There's no budget. Do not think about the budget right now. Whatever you do, if anybody brings up the budget, shh, just take, we'll deal with the budget later. Dream big right now. Dream big, go wild, and stay focused on your question. It's very easy to go over here and try to stay focused on your question. How might we fill in the blank, develop a contemporary service or do a preschool that's uniquely ours? Because that's how you come up with really cool things like our preschool is going to have like live elephants. All right, we'll figure out how later, but that really will make us unique, right? Apparently we're a preschool for the circus. So, and then what you want to do is make sure to remember, one person at a time, looking at your question. This one right here, where it says quantity T plus 5, this is the key of a good brainstorming section. So the T equals time, and the plus 5 means plus 5 more ideas. So let's say you're going to brainstorm for 20 minutes. You want to come up with no fewer than 25 ideas. You're going to brainstorm for 15 minutes. You want 20 ideas. You're going to brainstorm for 30. You're going to have 135 ideas. Be open, have fun, laugh. Here's the thing. The best ideas, the ones that you look back on and say like, that is brilliant, will be in the T plus 5. They'll be in the plus 5. I've seen it happen more than once. The easy ones always happen first, the elephant. Not that you might have thought of the elephants I did, but all these ideas are going to come earlier. What you want to do is in that plus 5 is where you're going to come up with some really innovative ideas. So you're like, okay, Lorenzo, this is amazing. I have a gazillion ideas that were all based on this research. And so we have the research, we have some good ideas that I think really go to the research, but we can't do them all. Now, what do? Well, good question. There's so many ideas. What you want to do is you want to make sure you cluster them. Generally, there will be many ideas that can be clustered together by themes. And that's easy enough to do. Yeah, I would recommend that when you do it like with Post-it notes and put them on the wall. And because that way you can cluster the themes together much easier. If not, you're just going to have to rewrite by themes together. Discard some of them. At this point, it is okay to be like, well, Lorenzo, could you have access to an elephant for this elephant school that you were telling us about? It's like, well, no, I really don't have access to it. Does anyone have access to an elephant? No. Well, why don't we put that one aside for now, and we'll deal with the elephant question later. Right now, let's just go ahead. And then eventually just start voting. And you will see that you'll generally coalesce around 1 or 2 ideas. And you want to come down to about 1 or 2 or 3 ideas. 2 or 3 ideas that you're like, any one of these would be amazing. If we did this and we succeeded, if we created a preschool that was this way or this way or this way, it would be great. If we did a contemporary service that was one of these 3 ways, I would leave the Sunday service to go to this service. That's what you want. You want ideas that just super excite you, that are just like, this is the Holy Spirit was at work here. Because then and now you're ready to move on to step number 3. So remember, step number 1, we generated the insights. Step number 2, we came up with ideas. Now comes the time to try. And this is perhaps one of the most, I just want to point out, remember when I said at the beginning, in case some of you weren't with us yet, the church usually begins at step number 2, which is how do we sit around and we say we throw spaghetti at the wall, see what sticks. But we haven't done the research, right? So we don't have the insights that can inform us as to which ones are really good ideas. In the book, I described this as a difference between saying, hey, Rebecca, let's go west. And she might be like, oh, okay, I guess we get in the car and go west. Or is that a thing? I don't know. Or, hey, Rebecca, let's go to Los Angeles. Like, oh, okay. I know we can take a plane. I know we can take a bus. I know we can take a train. Exactly. So you're able to be much more specific. That's why having those insights allow you to come up with better ideas to go after your question when you do that. So when we get to trying again, what I recommend here, remember our first mindset was be curious. Our second one was be playful. Now comes the time to be bold. Now is the time to actually go out there and try. And I'm going to introduce you to something that you probably have not you're probably not familiar with is this thing called the mission canvas, which we developed in business. There's a thing called lean canvas. If any of you went to business school or have seen, all it is, let me explain it to you before I go into all the details. All it is a one-page sort of business plan or mission plan that you can draft really quickly. But what it does is it forces you to look at all 9 areas, so you can be like, oh, this is a holistic thought. This isn't just like something random. This is, I've thought of all the areas of this idea and I still think it's good. Ah, now you have a solid idea. That's the difference. So when we look at this, remember, it should take you about 15 minutes. The order is generally just suggested. You don't have to go in order 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. It's okay to skip something for the moment. That's actually a great thing because it means you reach an area that you don't have an answer for and you need to do a little bit more research. That's great, because that means there were parts of your idea that weren't really fully thought through, that you still need to think through a little bit more. And you want to do one for each idea. So if you ended up with 2 ideas that came out of the brainstorm that you're like, either one of these 2 would be amazing, then go ahead and do one for each one of them. It won't take you that long. This is what it looks like up close, and you'll have it in the PDF of this. So do not worry too much about it. You can also find it at missioncanvas.org is where I put it for the world to see. So this is sort of what it looks like. Again, the 9 areas are the need. In other words, what is your question that you were trying to figure out? Like, how might we reach young people? Great. All right. Or how might we do our own, how might we do our contemporary service? Great. Our solution is number 2. So you put your question, now you have your solution. Great. Who are the stakeholders? Who are the people that need to be involved every step of the way so that we don't get lost in this? Who are the people that can make the decision yes or no on this, right? If you're like me in the Episcopal Church, your altar guild is basically the mafia, and you need to make sure that they're involved every step of the way, right? There are those people who just have a lot of power, so you want to make sure that you're able to go after them. How would you, number 4, what's your elevator pitch? In other words, you may have this long, our service is going to have this and this and this and the other, and it's going to be amazing. Great. That's good. Awesome. Yay. How would you explain to someone real quick in a way that they understand it and that it's clear? Number 5, the path. In other words, how am I going to get to those people that we're targeting this for, right? If we're doing this contemporary service for these young people, how are we going to get to them? Who do we know? How are we going to do that path? It forces you to think about, like, how will we do this, right? Number 6, can we find partners in this work? Is there anybody else? Is there, let's say we were talking about the contemporary service. Is there a music school nearby, like Wake Forest or something like that, that might have a band that we could borrow, or, where we could find some players that would want to do this for the experience and aren't that expensive, or might just do it for a free pizza on Thursday nights? These are the 2, number 7 and number 8 are the 2 that I do recommend go in this order. Number 7, what are the funding sources? Like, in other words, how much money can we come up with before you do number 8, which are, what are our expenses? And here's why. I have seen many ideas die because they went the other way. Because they began with, like, how much is it going to cost us? Oh, it's going to cost us $5,000 a service. And then how much can we raise? $500. Well, I guess the idea is dead. Just everyone go home. Nothing else to see here, right? When you do it the other way, when you're like, how can we, let's say you can raise $500, then the expenses become, how can we do it for $500? It changes your mindset a little bit when you know how much money you have, rather than the other way around. Because if you come up with some astronomical figure that's just like unrealistic, and then you try to figure out, oh, it's so easy for your creativity to stop. Whereas if you're like, hey, we have $500, how do we do it, right? How do we get to volunteer? How do we find cheaper people for this or for the other? And number 9 are the key metrics. In other words, how will we measure this? How, after doing it for a while, how will we know if what we're doing is successful? Simple. It can be whatever you want it to be. It could be butts and seats. It could be the fact that the people who came here are having transformational experiences, whatever you decide. That's up to you all. So, but you see, in this one sheet of paper, you're able to look at all of that together in one sheet of paper. And if the idea doesn't work, then you throw it out and you draft another 15 minutes of a new idea. And that's what's kind of cool about this. This, by the way, is also something that you can share with your key stakeholders as you keep bringing them in, right? Because you're like, hey, look at what we came up with. Do you guys have any questions? keep asking people. And then once you have the two, look at it and be like, okay, which one are we going to try? We could do both. They both seem great. They both are awesome. Just pray on it, discern on it, and eventually you'll come up with one. And I just want to point out, I know I'm running a little bit, we're almost at the end though, do not worry, but I know I'm running a little bit behind the hour. So just stay with me a little bit longer if you can. The first thing you want to do is you want to come up with your minimum viable prototype, your MVP. So using your mission canvas, and you know what you're going, how you're going to measure, right? Those key metrics. Strip away everything that you can until you can figure out. So if your key metrics are, let's say for the contemporary service was going to be how many people are going to come. Well, before you go out and build a service, could you do it as a one-night event rather than a service? Could you do like a mini revival for one night and do it during Lent or during a special season? The church provides us with beautiful seasons where we can start things and end things, and nobody will be the wiser that our goal was that it would last forever, right? So do a special event that also allows you to be like, could we advertise it? Were we able to get the right people to know about it? Were we able to, or if we were doing, for example, the school, don't build a school, build a website for the school. Spend $400, build a really nice looking website, and just be like, and put your name here if you want to find out more information. And if you advertise that website to parents around, and Facebook's a great way of advertising to parents, new parents, parents of a certain age. If all of a sudden you're not able to get people to sign up for more information, then you've got to be like, maybe this idea is not exactly what we thought. But you didn't build the school, you build a website for the school. But you can actually have like renderings and what an average day is going to look like, really dream it into being on the website, and then go out and advertise it to people. And once you know people are interested, then you build it. That's what we mean by minimum viable prototype. When we did that spin church thing, all we did was we rented a spin studio for 8 Saturdays and we advertised it on Facebook. That was it. That's all we had to do. The spin studio came with the person, and it came with the bicycles, and it came with everything else. So we did buy some cookies. I think we bought some cookies for afterwards, because I was like, if I'm going to do the Eucharist, I need cookies or some sweet. So it wasn't expensive. I think we spent like $2,500 total to try it out, but we tried it out, right? So that's what the minimum viable prototype allows you to do. And then once you have that, go out and try it. Just know that good enough is good enough. Don't go for perfect. Perfect is what will keep you from ever trying anything. Always keep thinking, what's the very next step to take to make this happen? It's okay to gauge interest using Facebook and Google ads. Remember, as a church, you get $10,000 a month from Google to advertise. Refine, update your mission canvas as you go along, and then try again. Because this is actually what the cycle sort of looks like. You'll try it, you'll evaluate, you'll iterate, and you'll either stop or you'll keep trying again. And that's how you'll keep going until it's something that you're like, this works. This is something that we can do. When you're evaluating, is it what we thought? Is this something we want to do? That's an important question, by the way, because you may have thought it through and it did work well. And afterwards, you're like, doing that contemporary service took a lot out of us. And I'm not sure that we're willing to put all that energy all the time. It's like, okay, could it be a quarterly thing? Could it be a yearly thing? It doesn't have to be a weekly. Just, is this what you want to do? Is this how you want to spend your time and your energy and your effort doing it? And it's okay if it didn't. In fact, a lot of times it's not going to. That's why you have other ideas. You have a ton of other good ideas that you can try. Is it something worth doing? Does it really match our vision for who we want to be? And then either roll it out or don't roll it out and call it a day and be like, yep, that was a good day. And all along the way, always remembering to get others involved and make sure that the stakeholders are buying in, because that's who this matters for. I do want to point out one last thing here of the 3 steps, is that there is a thing called the in-between time. And that is the moment from when you first have an idea to the moment that you actually launch the idea and are trying it. There's a lot of space in there. It could take months as you're putting all your partnerships together, as you're building the website. and it gets lonely and it gets tiring. And it's kind of like when you go on a road trip. When you first begin, you have the tunes playing and it's like your favorite song is like, this is amazing. And the wind is in your hair. And then like 30 minutes later, you're in traffic and it's raining and you're getting close to Charlotte. And you're like, oh my God, why do we do this again? And we're not even close to where we're going. We're going down to Florida. This is going to take forever. And then you're like, just keep going. It's a spiritual discipline, this in between time, so that we don't give it up. And as with everything, remember that it is all about Jesus and spreading of the gospel. Don't forget, especially when it gets lonely, when it gets long, when you're having arguments about budgets, all these things, it's about Jesus. It's not about anything else. All of this is available in the book. If you do buy it, please leave a review. Apparently, that makes a huge difference to the algorithms on Amazon. So if you do that, and as I say, now you know how, it's time to try. If you want some random ideas of the work that we're doing, you can sign up for our newsletter at TryTank.org. It comes out once a month only. We don't try to inundate you with emails, but it just has a whole bunch of things that we're trying. And I'm fairly honest in the newsletter about things that are working and not working. I know that I went sort of quickly. This is normally a 4-hour workshop that we did in 1 hour. So just so you know, I am available for questions. My email is simple, Lorenzo at TryTank.org. And with that, and only 8 minutes late, sorry about that. Thank you all for that. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing and bring it back. And Rebecca, there you go. Woof. Hope that was something.
Yeah, no, it was great. It's a lot of really great information. I see a couple of notes here. Somebody said so many exciting ideas, but not enough people in the congregation. What are your thoughts on that? I wonder if that's an opportunity for partnership. Does this have to be done kind of in a singular community, or can it be
You could
done?
absolutely do it with multiple communities if they're in the nearby area. Secondary, depending on what you're doing, let's say, for example, it was about the contemporary service, you could try to find some people that could help you that maybe are not in your congregation. And again, if you're going to do it as a one-time event, maybe get some young people and say like, hey, we want you to be the ones that help us lead this. So could you help us design it and do it as a one time? And maybe that's a way of getting them involved as well. If not, then that is one of the limitations. The same way that we couldn't find the elephant for the school that I wanted to do, that is a limitation. And you have to sort of come up with ideas that are within the possibility of the limitations that you have.
Are there any other questions? If you just want to unmute, and you can put them in there, or you can put them down in the chat box, whichever makes most sense for you. Sherry, do you have a question?
I don't. I'm just thinking about something that a group of us at Congregational Moravian have been thinking about getting involved with. It's a project called Bethany Cafe, and it's feeding the homeless. And it's basically a disciple group. It's 10 of us. And we just keep coming back to this idea. And this just gave me lots of, I can't wait to order the book. And I want to get on the phone and call some of the people that I'm in the group with so I can share this with them.
We did actually, using this same process, we came up with a food truck. And for every sandwich that we sold, we gave away a sandwich to someone who was in need that day. For every meal, a meal was donated, and it worked really well. It's still around. Now it does desserts though, so
Wow.
take that. Other questions? Again, you have my email, even if I know that a lot of people are of the let me process this fire hose of information that you just threw at me, Lorenzo. It's like, whoa, I don't even know where to begin. Once you begin processing, once you go through ideas, I'm open to anyone to just have a conversation. If you're looking for a conversation partner to think about your idea or something, just please, I'd be happy to talk with you on that. Just to be like, okay, this is what I would do. And I'd love to help you out. Even if I travel quite a bit, so it's a lot of times I can't do it by phone, or it might take us a while to be able to do it by Zoom or phone. But I can certainly respond via email to questions as well. And think of me as a resource, please.
Yeah, and I think the Commission on Congregational Development, like there will also be opportunities to sort of put this into practice together as we think about provincial things that we might do together. So you'll see this again, I'm sure, because I'm really intrigued by the process and I'd love to see it practiced a little bit, which is another thing that my experience with social innovation comes is that it feels a lot easier because it's practicing. Like you don't have to do it right the first time. You don't have to have figured out all the answers, but you kind of figure them out as you go. So that is really great. Thanks, Lorenzo, for being available to that. And
on that, I would mention, by the way, on that, it's important. I was all happy about the failures. In fact, sometimes I'm introduced as the guy that fails a lot. All right, there's worse things to be called, I suppose. But particularly people in congregations in the pew, when we fail, because of the fact that we're doing it for church, a lot of people take and think, I have failed God. So it's an opportunity to be pastoral with people that we're not failing God. Being faithful and trying new things is being faithful to God. And that's exactly what God wants. So just remind them, but know that is something that they carry, that people carry with them, is that thing is like, oh my God, if we fail, we're failing God. So just keep that in mind as you're doing this, that we may be like, oh, we lost $400, it's not that much, but there's an emotional component to that of like, oh, we just failed God. It's like, all right, we didn't really fail God. We just failed at this. We're being faithful to God.
Are there any other questions?
One, if I can get up. I just have a question. Appreciate all the wonderful information. Going through COVID, trying to get out of it. I think our church has been looking at ideas and things like that. I guess I'm just kind of curious what all kind of ideas have come up these last couple of years for you that maybe can just kind of fire hose us a little bit with what are some good things you've been seeing people doing and congregations doing?
I've developed, I really can't get into them right now because it would take a whole, the example the story that I give is that when I mentioned this to Rebecca when we got on first, I said, remember when we all started this whole thing? Oh no, it wasn't Rebecca, it's another Zoom, sorry. And I was like, 2 weeks to flatten the curve, 2 weeks to flatten the curve. And that was like 2 years ago. And we're like, is it flat yet? When we first arrive at an emergency and we get into the lifeboat, it's fine. But we don't necessarily want to keep doing the lifeboat 2 years later. We should be thinking about, and I was talking to a group where literally this poor woman had been doing Compline every day for something like 620 days or something like that. She had just taken it onto herself and she had been doing Compline on Facebook every night, right? She took on stuff. Our congregations will be vastly different because of this. Our numbers will not be the same. We will have dropped. Others are predicting much higher than this. I'm predicting between 20 and 25% of our congregations will not come back. Those were the ones that we didn't see every Sunday. They're called they call them the church going habit. So I would encourage you to reevaluate. Use this as an opportunity to also prune a little. It's an opportunity to let go of some things that perhaps you might be doing. There is an easy framework. Do I have a second to teach you all this real quick? I can do it on the back of this piece of paper. Do an axis. And what you want to do is at the bottom, resources, benefit. And so imagine benefit, resources, right? So what you want to do is you want to do a list of all of your ministries, and you want to put them like, how much resource are we putting into this ministry? How intensive is it to put this on? It might be that it's the men's group and they gather together for breakfast on Tuesdays. That's very little resources that it's taken, right, on this side. But then you want to look at what's the benefit. And then you might be like, well, the men's group doesn't really bring us a lot of benefit, but for the 3 people that are there, it's pretty cool. So it's not bad. It's like up here, right? Maybe that's the men's group. But this like Compline thing that I've been doing live every Thursday, every night for 628 days, at this point, it's taking a lot of resources for me to keep doing that or to find volunteers to do it. And then you might be like, what's the benefit? Well, and you can measure benefit in many different ways, but let's just say how many people are availing themselves of it? It's like, well, 3. It's like, oh, so that's very low. High resource and low benefit. That should, and what I like about this is that it paints a very black and white picture, but it allows you to be like, is that worth it? Because think about, in business school, they call it the opportunity cost. Whenever we do something, we are by definition at that moment not being able to do something else, right? I cannot be doing Compline live on Facebook at the same time that I might be leading a Bible study. I can't do both, right? I'm not saying, Teresa, I can't be 2 places at once. So when you look at it from this perspective at all of your ministries, it's an opportunity to be like, wow. And theoretically, for example, Sunday worship takes a lot of resources. That's good. But theoretically, it's also one of the things that brings the most benefit, right, to your whole congregation. Is you're like, yeah, that's exactly where we want. The things that are up here are awesome. The things that take low resource and high benefit, we thank the Holy Spirit for. You're like, this is amazing. We love these. The things that are down here that are low resources and low benefit, like, okay, you know, if it's, we don't want to put too much change. But the things that are here that are low benefit and taking up a lot of your resources, you should look at it and be like, why are we still doing that? Does that match with who we are? Is there a way that we can get more benefit for it as a congregation? Is there a way that we can get more out of it for the kingdom of God by doing that, considering the amount of resources that we're putting into it? Does that make sense? Does that sort of framework allow you to, this is a good thing to do, by the way, with your governing, do you all call them vestries, right? The governing board or the elders?
Board. Yeah, board.
Board. This is a great thing to do with the board because it's very black and white. And you can have conversations about the benefit, quote unquote, what does it mean to have benefit? But I'd rather have those conversations, like what is a benefit to us as a congregation? Because then all of a sudden you're also talking about who are we? You know, what's our why? Why do we exist? Those are the conversations that you're now having, which are great because they're missional conversations, rather than like, all right, can we find another volunteer to do Compline on Facebook because I'm just really tired. So I hope that answered your question, Doug. Especially coming out of COVID. Get off the lifeboat.
Right. Well, I think that I want to respect everybody's time. I know we went over a little bit.
Yeah, sorry.
Thank you so much for hanging out. This will, you know, we'll continue having this conversation. Certainly send questions to Lorenzo, and you know, we'll keep having this conversation with the commission as well. So I'm looking forward to it. But thank you so much, Lorenzo, for your time and for sharing your insights with us. Go get the book, check it out. I don't know.
Leave a review.
Yeah, leave a review, right? But maybe this is a book, if some of you are going to read it and wanted to have like an e-chain to talk about the insights that you're getting from the book and the ideas and inspiration you're getting from it, let us know and we'll connect a group, because I think that could be a cool way to kind of be encouraging to each other. If you're all trying things, to have other people that are also doing that. I think sometimes we feel like we're alone with these crazy wild ideas, and I think that there are actually a lot more ideas out there than we at first thought. So thanks everybody. We'll see you again.
Thanks everyone. God bless you all in your work.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. The next workshop is on Saturday at 9. All right. Thanks everybody.